store.
Yeah.
Because it just feels like here we all are, you know, and we're here because this is what we need to wake up and be sane, good human beings. And I don't think where there's any above or below of, but I love it when I see people going. And in some ways, I think when I used to work with returning veterans, Iraq and Afghan veterans, I had the same feeling of they were, I mean, if you've been in combat or anywhere close to it, you're not practicing because it's a nice idea. You're practicing because you have to. You just know you're going to slide off the edge if you don't show up. And I feel that way with AA in a certain way. You know, these problems, these difficult things. It's like thank you, Buddha. You got my attention. Those of us who have what we might think as lesser problems, we got a little more room to slip and slide around in. But the more you practice, you just realize it's an amazing, precious gift to be a human being. And don't waste this opportunity. So as I said before, this book by Laura Burgess, who I know from Zen Center years, The Zen Way of Recovery, an Illumined Path Out of the Darkness of Addiction. She talks about having a split life. I just think, you know, it's like I shared some of her Way Seeking Mind talk a few weeks ago. Is you can show up and look pretty shiny and have a whole secret life, which we all have in one way or another. And then I also want to pull forward, because in the most recent Tricycle magazine, Katie Butler, who's also a Zen Center friend, is talking about addiction, but she's talking about food addiction. So that feels really important, that we're just not talking about substance. I mean, there's many different ways that we use to exist and numb our pain and make it through. So Laura, in the dedication of her book, oh, first of all, let me say, this is always true here, confidentiality. So if we move into small groups, or if I ask a question and people raise their hands or whatever, confidentiality means, one, you can say to people outside of this room, you know, we're looking at Zen and recovery, and you could say that kind of thing, but you wouldn't say so-and-so said something. And in a small group, if somebody says something, it stays there. And if you want to follow up on something, you could say, would it be all right to talk about something or to ask you a question about something? And you have an absolute right, please, to say, no, that was just fine, which is often the case. Just what you say in that moment was full and perfect and complete. And maybe it's nice that somebody asked, and maybe you want to go have tea, but confidentiality, it stays here. Otherwise, it's not safe. So Laura says in her introduction, this book is dedicated to all those in the path of recovery, past, present, and future. I would say we're all on the path of recovery. And then she says, may we continue to heal each other, which feels to me, oh, that's what good spiritual friends do, is we heal, we witness each other, we listen to each other, we practice shining the light within and studying our own judgmental minds and our own confusion. I was going to ask you, and then I was going to skip it, but now I'm not going to ask it. So I mean, I am going to ask it. Is because I don't want to just focus this again on substance and alcohol and drugs, but how many people have a history of substance abuse in your family system, or a good friend who's died or had some kind of yeah. Yeah, I've got a history, and it's really important to know your family history. Amazing. You think, oh, that was my crazy family. That's not me. Lo and behold, in one way or another, it's like, whoops, I guess there's genetics and just born into systems. We're born Americans. Just so let me read you a couple of things from Laura. She again, I was reading this book on vacation, and my husband picked it up too, who also knows Laura. And Bruce is not effusive in giving compliments. It's not like he doesn't care or anything, but what he said was he thought this was an amazing book because it takes Buddhist teachings and makes it completely accessible and practical. So it's, I'd recommend it. Chapter 3, the Buddha's story is our story. This is from the Buddha in the Dhammapada. The thought manifests as the word manifests as the deed develops into habit, the habit hardens into character. So watch the thought and its ways with care, and let it spring from love, born out of concern for all beings. The thought manifests as the word manifests as the deed develops into habit, and habit hardens into character. So watch the thought and the ways with care. Watch your thoughts with care, and let it spring from love, out of concern for all beings. It's a beautiful translation, the Dhammapada. When the Buddha was asked, "Who are you? What are you?" he gave this simple answer: I am awake. I love that. My own personal milding aversion to the word enlightenment is waking up. To me, it feels like, oh yeah, I am awake. In fact, the word Buddha means just that, one who has awakened. The Buddha spent his life offering his teachings to whoever wanted them, sharing wisdom that would help others awaken too. He said, I teach about suffering and about an end to suffering. So simple. The Buddha story is our story. When the Buddha leaves home to find the truth, we recall the old ideas and family patterns that we had to leave behind as we set off on our own life's journey. I, at 26, got in a car and drove from Ohio to San Francisco Zen Center and never turned back. I wasn't so sure what I was doing, but I knew I needed to get out of there. No, we all have some story. When the Buddha touches the ground and raises a hand to the heavens, he is asserting not only his own right to awakening, but confirming the potential for awakening that lives within each one of us. We must examine the stories of our family and our culture that we have been told, and we need to find our own path, just like the Buddha did. This often involves the discomfort of displeasing the very people we spent our whole childhood trying to please, including trying to please ourselves, whatever we think that is. And in this challenging world that demands so much of us, we may turn towards addictive behaviors to soothe ourselves and decrease our anxieties. Addiction is the opposite of awakening. Addiction may just be Mara. Constance taught us about Mara. The archetype of Mara, or symbol of our own distracted nature. I love that one of the things that the Buddha talked about was restlessness, basic restlessness. You know, it's like you amp it up a little bit and you're into anxiety, and then you're into, I mean, we're in a time and a culture of anxiety, and then how are you going to deal with the anxiety? What are you going to do? Chapter 4, living from the inside out. The Buddha taught the great truth of impermanence, this tender sadness that comes with being alive. Friends die, children grow up, we face rejection and loss. Those whom we love let us down, and we feel mad or sad or incomplete. Part of the training of traumatic children is the Brian Post is the originator of the way this particular program is taught. And there's a film that they show of just a child growing up in trauma. I mean, I grew up in small T trauma. Some people grow up in big T trauma, but you just watch it. It's so painful to watch it because I can find those places in myself. You just turn it up a little bit and then you realize how this happens. If we can deeply accept the feelings and walk through them to the other side, we build strength within ourselves that we can share with others. We stay with that sadness rather than being ashamed of it or trying to make it go away. We make friends with what we might have previously rejected in ourselves and others, going wide-eyed into those dark places, knowing that we will survive. I want to say, because Zenju Earthling Manuel, as a person of color, has been saying, let's rehabilitate the word darkness, because darkness sounds bad. I want to use darkness, and I want to trust that Laura is, although she doesn't say that specifically, I don't think, is darkness is rich. Darkness is, I mean, I don't even want to say the underworld, but I love soil. You don't love good, dark, rich soil and know that it comes from compost and it comes from, it's just a whole world that isn't, that is, you need light and shadow. You can't separate them out. They're called alive. We get that whatever is happening, this too shall pass. I learned that nothing that could happen to me would be improved without the addition. I learned that nothing that could happen to me would be improved with the addition of alcohol. When I got sober, I heard people say, you don't have to drink if you don't want to. But I was more relieved to hear, you don't have to drink even if you do want to. She talks about it. I'm going to turn to Katie now. You know, it's like so many of us, well, in that generation, we went to Zen Center. Here we go, wherever we go. And well, before we used to pretty much be told that Zazen was going to cover everything. Just sit. If you just sit hard enough, it'll just solve everything. It was humbling to look around after many years. None of us, I mean, we're a little clearer than we used to be. Some of us maybe sometimes, but in both Katie and Laura's case, they really say I know them, they're dedicated practitioners, and they needed to go to AA and they needed to go to therapy. You know, it's like you can't skip this stuff. It's the road through. So let me Katie's article is called Not Empty, Not Full. A food addict finds freedom in constraint. She talks about at 28, she went to San Francisco Zen Center. Many of my generation went. And living a parallel secret life. Over the next 2 decades, I would live for a summer at Tassajara, complete several Soto Zen sessions, marry and divorce a gem of a fellow Zen student, and study the Satipatthana Sutta, the discourse on the establishing of mindfulness, and the Flower Ornament Sutra, the Avatamsaka Sutra, in France with Thich Nhat Hanh. Within the orderly quiet of Buddhist communities, my food problems were often quiescent. And when I returned to lay life, compulsions and obsessions often structured the rhythm of my days. I hit my lowest point in the early 50s. We're talking about lifetimes of really sincere people practicing deeply to wake up. Bulimia, anorexia. I could not face, much less heal, my broken life. Nobody knew what I was doing, not even me. I once heard Thich Nhat Hanh suggest that if one drank whiskey mindfully, one would soon stop drinking alcohol altogether. But concentrated substances provoke in the physiologically vulnerable and insatiable craving. Mindfulness, this is important because I think we often come starry-eyed, is there's a long history in Zen of substance abuse, of teachers, not everybody, and of sexual abuse, and everything has its shadow. Mindfulness did not prevent a revered Japanese Zen teacher from drowning drunk in a bathtub, or stop a brilliant Tibetan Rinpoche from dying at 47 like a gutter drunk, or prevent his American spiritual heir from transmitting AIDS to one of the many students he seduced. This is the benefit of living in this time, because there's a lot of us who know this stuff and who can say, please practice, and please keep your eyes wide open. She too did not know that there was a hungry ghost inside me that I would someday need to meet, modulate, and befriend. My first Zen teacher had told me that I was, quote, very unconscious. This was Thich Nhat Hanh. I was surprised. I didn't know Thich Nhat Hanh said things like that to people. He said that I knew everything except how to live. Before I encountered Buddhism, I had tried to think my way out of the paper bag of my own suffering. I'd often experienced my body not as a refuge, but a place of sexual vulnerability and roiling emotions. My interpretation of Zen practice, with its emphasis on sitting through physical pain, had unfortunately reinforced that distancing. I think that's a really important, is I know I came into this practice because of my history. I knew how to dissociate. And it's a really thin line between being able to sit in the midst of pain and dissociating from pain. Because if you sit a long retreat, or you seriously pain, you're going to run into pain in your body, in your heart, and your spirit. So what is the difference between just distancing, being able to sit upright and looking like a good Zen student, and it reinforcing a pattern of going away, or being able to distance from your feelings and your body and your emotions? I learned it really well in my family system. I'll bet some of you did too. We're saying something really different here, is we're saying, sit down in the midst of your life and we'll help each other heal and wake up and feel what needs to be felt. And you do it gently, with great care and with great love and with great compassion and with good friends. And to me, what a teacher is just a good spiritual friend, so that you have somebody that you don't have to do it all by yourself with. But if you have a good, wise spiritual friend, you use them. At Plum Village, Thich Nhat Hanh taught me to regard my body as a haven and a sanctuary, a potential source of ease and bliss. He encouraged us to enjoy our breathing and to notice and amplify our feelings of gratitude and joy as a basis for meditative concentration and insight. But I could not fully make use of his teachings and enter my own body until I got my addiction to sugar, or whatever it was, as it turned out in my daily life, under some control. Beneath every addiction lies a secret, painful story. Be it the universal human uneasiness with things as they are, or more specifically, personal griefs. And then she goes on to tell her story. We all have stories. Everybody has it. That's what's so beautiful. It's really, everybody has a story. Even who you think those crazy other people are. What's the matter with them? Everybody has a story. Is in the training that we're doing about traumatized children, his perspective is that if there's see if I can get, I hadn't thought this through that I was going to say it, but it's always investigate the fear. What's underneath the trigger? What's happening? So investigate your fear body. Know what it looks like and what it feels like. Be able to meet it with some kind of compassion, or somebody else's. If you think those other people out there doing this stuff, there's fear underneath that. That's where we're all joined here. And the appropriate response is love, which is to not like do whatever you want, but just unconditional acceptance of you're a human being, and I'm here. I'm not going to break this connection. I don't know how we're going to do it, but I'm here. I know you just started school. All these wild, and my son is a teacher. All these wild, crazy little easier said than done. If intimacy in my Soto Zen community was primarily based on shared silence, my 12-step practice has largely been based on telling and listening to life stories. Year by year, layer by layer, this storytelling communion has incrementally worn away my shame. This body I try to remember, as the poet Rumi says, is a guest house, each day a new arrival. Fear, discomfort, gratitude, history, contentment, joy, resentment, anticipation, I try to welcome them all. I will never know how much credit to give to my 12-step recovery and how much to the practice of time or my Buddhist practice. And I would say the same thing. I have no idea. I spent a decade in therapy. I feel enormously grateful. I've been practicing for a long, long time. I feel enormously grateful. I also feel enormously lucky in this life, the good fortune of so many things. When, I can look at other people in my family and it could have gone this way and it went this way, is just practice means waking up with what you've been given. And the goal, if there is one, is, I would say, kindness and compassion. And it starts here and we extend it out. So here's the question that I thought, we'll have a few minutes. You can say whatever you want, what comes up in this. This one is reflect on your experiences of impermanence, which is basically life didn't turn out the way you thought it was going to, and how that affected you. And sometimes our failures end up leading to our true path. So maybe something arises for you that you really wish it hadn't happened, but you wouldn't be here without it. I wouldn't be practicing. There's just no question. I don't think people come. I think every now and then there are bodhisattvas who just skip down the road and go, oh, let's practice. What a great idea. and it is a great idea, but I think many of us, and it took me a long time to know it, stumble in the door because you're stumbling in the door and you just don't know what else to do, in some kind of karmic good fortune across lifetimes. This is where you end up, but it could have been someplace else too. So maybe there's only a little bit of time here. Why don't we do in groups of two? And what's something that you can think of that helped bring you in the door or bring you to practice that